Coming up tonight on the Cruise View, the Quantum goes to battle in St. Martin. We grab a slice of pizza and do some shopping on the Esplanade. Plus, I sit down with the Quantum Seas Hotel Director to find out how he keeps this ship afloat. It's all coming up, so let's set sail. Welcome to day 5 of this Cruise View's second sailing on board the Quantum of the Seas. And today was another port of call for us in St. Martin. We arrived at about 9 a.m. this morning, and at the time the Celebrity Constellation was already in port, along with P&O Azura and a fleet mate, the Adventure of the Seas. So it was a very royal day in St. Martin with 3 of the 4 ships belonging to Royal Caribbean. And this morning for our arrival is a very nice condition out, very warm, sunny, not too much wind, just a gentle breeze, nothing bad. Certainly one of the nicest days to be out on deck so far. And the overall weather for today, we had a sunrise at about 6:30 a.m. this morning, so long before we started our arrival, and a sunset at 5:36 p.m. We had a high of 82 degrees, and it was mostly cloudy conditions with unfortunately a few showers in the afternoon and really scattered throughout the day. Nothing major, just mostly a sprinkle. And we had roughly 10 knot winds, so it seemed like at some times it was completely calm, and at others it seemed a bit higher than that. But tonight, at least, once we're back out at sea right now, we have significantly smoother seas. It is completely flat out there, really not a wave in sight. And as I mentioned, we did have some sprinkles today, and that did cause some problems for excursions in St. Martin. Not too many. It was very limited to more the beach-specific ones. There are also issues with, I guess, the way the currents are currently flowing. It brought a lot of seaweed up on the beaches on the one side of the island, so a lot of beach excursions were given the option to cancel. And all the seaweed combined with the poor weather conditions led us to choose to cancel our excursion once again. It's really rather amazing how many times I've said that during this podcast, considering how few times, I think never, that had occurred before starting this. But I doubt there's a coincidence in that. But at least it was a nice day on board the Quantum of the Seas. It was rather empty. There were a lot of special guests on board touring the ship, and more importantly, there were 3 Royal Caribbean ships in port, so there were a lot of officers from both the Celebrity Constellation and the Adventure of the Seas touring the Quantum today to see what else their options are for their next contract, I'm sure. But then this evening, at about 5 p.m., it was time for the departures to start, and the first ship out of port was the Celebrity Constellation, which was docked directly across the pier from us, and she left promptly at 5 p.m., and of course, being a Royal Caribbean ship, on her way out, she gave a nice little horn battle with the Quantum. And then following that at 6 p.m., both the Quantum of the Seas and the Adventure of the Seas were scheduled to depart. And a few minutes before 6, actually about 5 or 10 minutes before 6, the Quantum of the Seas started her engines and began her way out, immediately prompting a horn battle from the Adventure of the Seas. And then as she started to make her way out farther and was almost clear of the pier, the Adventure of the Seas started her departure and decided she needed a second horn battle, so there was not one but two horn battles with the Adventure of the Seas this evening. And the Adventure, of course, slowly made her way out and followed us right out to sea, giving a beautiful sight to everyone with the sun setting right around the time the Constellation was leaving and finishing up by the time the Adventure left. So it was overall a rather poor weather condition day in St. Martin, but a great ship spotting day, especially for any Royal Caribbean fans out there. And this evening, we have a nearly full moon. It's been getting fuller with each day, so now that we're down in the islands, it's pitch black out there, but you can still spot all the deserted islands off in the distance, make out those black shadows against the gray skies as a result of that full moon. So it really is beautiful out there this evening, especially with those completely flat seas. Unfortunately, there are some scattered showers still, and right now there is actually one. I had originally planned for this episode to be outside, but the rain moved in, so unfortunately we are in a seaplex, but it's still a nice venue to look out at the ocean from. And as for our compass summary, it was a port day, so that means that it was a significantly emptier schedule as you would expect. Not many people on the ship, no reason to have events to really be scheduled for them. So really the only true event on the schedule today was the headliner showtime starring Joel Mason tonight, and he is an Elton John tribute act.
Sing this. And I need a lot of time, so touchdown brings me down again to find your candle burned out before the legendary.
Overall, it was a good act. It was, of course, being one of the showtime scheduled for 45 minutes. It actually went on for a full hour, so it was a little bit longer than scheduled. But that's always good. You never want shorter, always longer. And it was a very entertaining act. The only issue I had with it is that it was a tribute act as the showtime for the evening. And when Royal Caribbean originally announced the tribute bands and music hall and this whole new concept, one of the things was that you would no longer have tributes as your headliners. All those would be in music hall with longer performances, more guest interaction, a little more intimate. So it just seems a little unusual for them to schedule that for today's headliner rather than sticking him in music hall over the next 4 nights, which I think would have been a much better experience, especially based on seeing what we've had with both the Beatles tribute and the Bon Jovi tribute. It certainly is a much more enjoyable environment. You get a little more interaction with the band and you get a much better concert feeling experience out of it. So I wish they would have chosen to do the same thing with this Elton John act, but it was still enjoyable in the theater either way. And then moving on from the compass, today's Daily Dine, we're going to continue with the casual port days with what is probably the most popular eatery on any Royal Caribbean ship, and that is Sorrento's Pizza. Sorrento's Pizzeria. Introduced a long time ago as an extension of the Cafe Promenade, it's continuously grown larger and larger into its own venue, and on board the Quantum of the Seas, it's been reunited back with the Cafe Promenade directly next door, but it is still a standalone venue offering a large counter service area with a wide selection of pre-made pizzas as well as a made-to-order section. So at any time you can come in and get yourself a pizza made just the way you like. It is also one of the main locations for the Coca-Cola Freestyle machines, available 24 hours a day right at the entrance. And I will likely be visiting there after filming this episode, as I usually do. It is probably the best place to go in the middle of the night to get a quick snack before heading off to bed. And for tonight's venue, we are going to be looking at that same area with the Royal Esplanade shopping and the Via. The Royal Esplanade, another ship-to-yacht promenade that offered a variety of food and shopping options. On the Quantum of the Seas, you have the Esplanade and the Via instead. The Esplanade starts at the forward end of the ship on deck number 4, as well as up on deck number 5. Deck 5 is dedicated to the schooner bar, as well as a variety of eating and other bar options. Deck 4, on the other hand, is the center of all the shopping. The forward part that winds around the music hall and Michael's Genuine Pub offers the most shops with Kiehl's beauty products, Michael Kors designer apparel, Sundials, which offers sunglasses, Prince and Green, which also offers designer clothing, Regalia jewelry and watches, After that, the main portion of the Esplanade, which looks like an Oasis-class promenade, just smaller, known as the Rendezvous Court, then features, of course, Sorrento's and Cafe Promenade, but also the Port Merchants and Logos shop. As well as a few kiosks in the middle of the Esplanade that offer daily deals and other shopping specials throughout the sailing. Located on deck 5 then, at the aft end of the Esplanade, is the Via. Following a short little passageway with some inspirational music and butterflies, you then reach the main rotund, which features the Hublot and Fogari store, which offers fine jewelry and watches. The Via then continues off to the 270 venue in the back of the ship. So between the Via and the Esplanade, you can pass all the way from the Royal Theater to 270 with the single passageway. So the Royal Esplanade may not be a royal promenade by definition, but it is still serving the same function, and it's really a nice environment to just sit down, relax. A lot of traffic still passes through there, so there's still plenty of people watching if that's what you liked about the promenade, but it's still the heart of the ship, the main artery to get through, serves all the same functions. And of course, it's one area of the ship that you cannot avoid even if you wanted to. And moving on now to today's interview, we have a very special, and I got to sit down with the hotel director on board the Quantum of the Seas, Mr. Darren Budden.
The honor and the privilege to serve as a hotel director on board the Quantum. Thank you for choosing to vacation with us on board the Quantum of the Seas. Thank you for joining us here this evening, and I do look forward to meeting with you around the ship.
Today I am joined by the hotel director on board the Quantum of the Seas, Darren Budden.
Hi there.
Hi, thank you for joining me.
Anytime.
So, as the hotel director, you're responsible for nearly everything and service a guest interacts with on a daily basis. What do you do to prepare for such a varied role?
Well, firstly, to clarify, on any ship in the world, you have a marine function, or what we refer to as a marine function. So that's the navigation and safety elements, as well as the engineering side for the propulsion of the ship, the electricity, etc. On cruise ships, we have a little bit of a different operation, which we refer to as the hotel. So that does include all things like the accommodation area, the obvious one, but then it also includes food and beverage, it includes cruise programs, which is all the entertainment things, it includes a guest services function, as well as an IT function, which is quite large on this particular ship. We have another area which is known as the inventory management area, so they in essence manage our grocery list as well as all the other supplies and things that we need. So in essence, I work together with 10 division heads, all of whom are experts in each one of their areas. And so my role is very much to provide oversight to those areas and to ensure they have all of the tools and the resources that they need to deliver an outstanding guest vacation product. So I would say there's no one who's going to be in my role who's going to be successful if they don't have a competent, capable team that really do work together as a team and communicate openly with one another. So I would say my key to success is I try to be very organized, I try to be forward-looking, and really just spend a lot of time interacting with our guests to understand what they feel about our product delivery, and then communicating well with between the different functions within our team to make sure we're doing everything we can to deliver the very best guest experience.
Okay. And then, unlike the marine positions on board the ship, there are hotel directors on land. So what made you choose to take up a sea-based position?
I have a little bit of a different career background. I guess my first part that I would respond to is having a career at sea brings with it some interesting challenges as well as some real tangible benefits. When you're a sea-bearing vessel that goes out for extended periods of time, whatever resources you have with you are the resources that you have. So if you start to run low in a particular item, you really don't have the option to send someone down to the street to buy it. So we need to do a very good job of predicting what consumption volumes are going to be and to ensure we have enough of everything we're going to need to deliver the product. Similarly, for essential services, we don't have the ability to pick up the phone and call a medical professional to come and help someone. We have to have that expertise on board. Similarly, to a firefighting capacity, we need to have crew members trained on board in a role that we call a mobile group, who are in essence firefighters that would respond in the event that we actually do have a challenge on board. And so every crew member also has an emergency duty that we're trained in that we would have to go to in the event of an emergency. So those are kind of some of the unique, interesting elements of having a hotel operation that floats and goes to different parts of the world, in addition to the immigration impacts, because we are going to different countries and those sorts of things, which makes it a little bit different, a little bit unique than, say, a hotel that is land-based in Los Angeles, for example. With that being said, the rewards of working at sea are that we work for extended periods of time. We don't have weekends off, we don't have statutory holidays, etc. Every day you're on board, you work. That means you go through a 4-month contract and then you have a 2-month vacation. So you kind of add up that time off. And then you can take a vacation where you can really recharge and go to a part of the world and travel. And it seems like a lot of people involved in the shipping industry are very interested in travel. The other benefit is you do make very good friends who live in different parts of the world, so when you go on vacation there, you already have an infrastructure of people that you know. Oftentimes they want you to stay with them, so you can get really authentic experiences when you visit Japan or when you visit Austria, versus the typical tourist experience and looking at the brochure and the tours that are on offer. So I would say that's probably the most interesting and rewarding elements of having a sea-based career versus working on land.
So in all the places that you've traveled so far, which one would be your favorite?
That's an outstanding question. I would answer that with saying, for everybody, guests as well as people who work on board, or anybody in the world for that matter, you really do have places based on special memories and magical things that happen from time to time. And they become ingrained as magical moments in places that really sway the way you feel about different ports of call. If I list a number of the most fascinating ports of call, I would say that St. Petersburg, Russia would be one of them. I would say that Rome would be another one. Going into Naples and visiting the Amalfi Coast is extraordinary. Circumnavigating New Zealand and going to Milford Sound was phenomenal, as well as so many other places in that part of the world. One evening that really stands out for me, we had an opera singer by the name of Renato who was performing on board the ship, and he decided to do an impromptu performance in the dining room without a microphone. We had some dignitaries from Venice on board, so we had prepared a special dinner together, and we were drinking some nice wine and just looking out through the window in the evening at Venice and having this music. It was just extraordinary, and even when I talk about it now, it kind of gives me a little bit of goosebumps. So that would certainly be one of the things that was on my list. So I think there are different fascinating ports of call, but ultimately it comes down to the people you're sharing them with and the exciting things that happen that create those kinds of lifelong memories. And I think it's going to be unique for everybody.
Okay. And then switching back to some of your duties on board, you mentioned there are a lot of different people that work under you that you're responsible for managing that cross all different topics and areas. How do you manage to stay on top of what has to be a multitude of projects going on at any given time?
I do have a system. I use a planner. And so for every one of my direct reports, I have a tab in my planner that I keep a running tally of different projects that are going on or questions that I need to ask them. And I'm continually taking notes, and something will pop into your head, and you'll make a note to follow up and check on the status of that. And then I also have a planning function within that area where I keep track of all of my time-based appointments. And then on a daily basis, I move my following day time-based appointments into a schedule, and then I have a running to-do list that goes on the opposite side of those pages. So that's really my methodology for making sure nothing falls through the cracks, and then I have a good visibility and overview to what's happening in each of the different functional areas on board the ship, and it also provides me a good record for reflection when we get nearer to the end of the contracts and I need to provide performance and evaluation feedback to each of the people that report to me. So that's been my system over the years. It's worked for me.
Okay. And then operating at sea, as you mentioned, has one major downside in that you cannot quickly restock anything. So how do you account for some of those unexpected events like a norovirus outbreak, or even more relevant in the Northeast, a giant blizzard keeping you out of port?
Yes, we have a system for our inventory management. We have an inventory manager who also has a team that works together with him, and their whole role is to take a look at our consumption data from the past and predict what it will be in the future. And they've become very good at those predictions, and we take historic data for other ships that have operated in the same environment. So prior to our coming here, the Explorer has been doing this similar run. With a similar demographic. So we look at their consumption data, and that allows us the baseline for planning. And then, of course, we put in a buffer in the event that we were ever able or unable to get into port on a particular day. I've had that happen to me twice in my career, where I've had 7-day cruises that have turned into 9-day cruises. So we do always like to have a little bit of a buffer, and then those last couple days of menu become very impromptu in terms based on what we have available. So it doesn't happen very often, but from time to time it does. And again, it requires a real collaborative team effort to make use of all the resources that you do have at your disposal. And we also have some opportunities, if something doesn't arrive, for us to do what we call a downline purchase. So for example, right now today we're on our way into San Juan. We do have some relationships with some suppliers there if we were short on a few particular items where we could possibly pick those up before heading out. But for the most part, we try as much as possible to have our supply chain integrity, because that's the best way for us to ensure we have the top quality and of course the best pricing, so that we keep our costs down and we add that value on to our guests. So again, we do have an entire function that manages that to make sure that we have the right amounts of everything that we need on board with some buffer.
So then the Quantum of the Seas was a completely new class. So you mentioned you used some historical data from ships like the Explorer that did that run. How close did that get you on your estimates? Was it fairly accurate, or were there still some hiccups?
It was fairly accurate, but we had to adjust for numbers, because we are a larger ship and we will carry more people. And the other thing that we look at is, over the years we've gotten quite good at predicting different demographics, consumption preferences. And so without sounding too wide sweeping, if we were, for example, to see a large number of Brazilian guests coming on board, we have data around what they prefer to eat, what they prefer to drink. And so one of the preferences, just offhand, is Johnny Walker Black Label is generally very popular with that demographic. So as we forecast out our 120 days, or our 90 days, or 60 days in advance, it gives us an opportunity to adjust up or down different quantities of other items that are known preferences based on demographic and nationality breakdown. And our inventory team does that. So I would say we did a very good job of predicting what we were going to need on the food and beverage side in particular, with one wild card, which is during our inaugural season, while we're doing tester cruises, we're not charging for things. So free consumption is very different than paid consumption. So there were a few items there that were more popular than we were anticipating. Again, it's because when it's a free environment, you don't necessarily get the same consumption patterns. We very quickly adjusted for those. We did something we call an add-on order to get our par levels up to right, and now all is right in the world.
Okay. Then the introduction of dynamic dining has had an impact on the food and beverage department, obviously, but it also has had a ripple effect through some of the other departments, such as housekeeping, that now have a different schedule. How have you had to adjust the way your various departments are working with this new system?
Dynamic dining is intended to give our guests the power of choice. It's intended to put the decisions for their cruise vacation in the palm of their hand, so they can use the app, or they can use one of our Royal IQ stations to make show reservations, make dinner reservations. I believe the model that most people are using is they look at the show schedule to decide what show they want to go see, and then they choose their dining that will line up accordingly. There will be evenings when they choose not to go to a show, or there may be evenings when they choose to celebrate something. Our data tells us that 50% of our guests on board are celebrating something while they're on board with us. So that was another driver for discontinuing formal nights and adding a formal restaurant. So every night in our grand restaurant is formal night, and people will dress accordingly. So now people get to celebrate their special events on the day of and get dressed up and take photos, rather than having to do it on one of the nights that we were designating as a formal night. So again, that's another benefit of dynamic dining. It puts those options and the choice more in the consumer's hands to do what they want when they want. To your point, that makes a difference in our traffic flow patterns through the ship, which means that our scheduling has to adjust within housekeeping, within our cleaning schedules, within our restaurant schedules, as well as our entertainment. But for the most part, what we start with is a show schedule, and then we have our restaurant options, and people choose one, then the other, and balances it out. Mm-hmm. And we are still continually adjusting our schedules on all elements of the ship based on the traffic patterns. Because whenever you introduce a new class of ship, you really don't have any insight to how popular these different things are going to be. We have our gut feelings, and for the most part they've been fairly well on since we've introduced the Quantum, but there have been a few other things that we didn't realize or didn't think about in advance, so we've had to adjust the schedules accordingly, particularly as it goes around the cleaning schedules.
Okay. And then IT has long been an important part of a ship, but with the Quantum it is now placed basically in the spotlight for everybody to look at, and it's much more integrated into the everyday operations of all the various departments on board the ship. So how has this affected the way that that group is run on board?
Our IT department is really central to everything that happens, and we have a very large land-based support system who are also helping us, making sure that everything that we've introduced that's so new is working properly. We are referring to Quantum as the world's first smart ship, and what that means is there are a lot of new technologies that are being implemented here. If I do a systems count, we've probably got double the number of systems that our other ships in our fleet have. Some of the highlights of what makes us a smart ship: the RFID readers for opening staterooms, and then WOW bands. So anything you do with your CPAS card, you can also do with your WOW band. We have a bionic bar that allows our guests to order drinks and have robots prepare them. We have a lounge called 270 that's got robots, screens on the end, or screens on the ends of robot arms, as well as a Vistarama projection series that integrate new media and the way that we operate theater in a way that we've not seen before. We also have O3B connection speeds for our satellite, which really is a game changer from a cruise perspective, because people can really stay connected while they're on board with high-speed internet, and they can do things that we were never able to do before. So again, making all of those things work, and I'm sure with your experience and your background, you're aware that just the smallest change in one system can have a carry-on and ripple effect in others. So it's something that we probably watch more closely than anything else, is to make sure that all of our systems are working nicely together and they're communicating with one another, so that our guests are able to make use of that technology and at the end have a better cruise vacation experience.
And then the Quantum of the Seas is headed to China next. So how will this impact the way that you operate these guest services on board?
The Quantum is headed to the fastest growing market in the cruise industry, and that is, of course, China. There are a number of differences that we know about the Chinese demographic preferences when it comes to food. So we'll be making a lot of changes in the Windjammer, for example, so that we have a lot more noodle stations. We have wok cooking versus a lot of what is traditionally North American style fare and presentation here. We'll be changing the menus in a number of our dining rooms. Believe it or not, our Azumi sushi restaurant does not have an offering that would be very popular in China or in Asia in general, because it's very North American and cosmopolitan in its appeal currently, so we would need to make some changes there. We know that our Asian guests really enjoy gaming, but they have different gaming preferences than what we currently have, so we'll be doing a fairly significant change out from that perspective and expanding the size of our casino into some of the other adjacent rooms. And then probably the only thing we know they enjoy more than gaming is shopping. So our retail experiences, while they're probably the best on any ship at sea, when you look at the brands like Hublot and Cartier and Bulgari that we have on board, will be even further expanded to have more luxury goods, because that lines up with what our guests want. And so at the end of the day, anytime we take a product and move it from one environment into another, be it from a New Jersey environment going into Asia, or be it from a Miami environment going into Barcelona, we will customize the product to better reflect the needs and wants of the guests that we're going to be carrying on board. And certainly Quantum going to Asia is going to be no different.
Okay. Is there anything else that you would like to say to the viewers?
I would like to say that we are definitely changing the cruising world with the Quantum of the Seas. We've added some fantastic new amenities. We have things like the Seaplex, which is an amazing transformative space that goes from being able to play basketball and volleyball to being a circus school with bumper cars and roller skating. We have the iFly by Ripcord, which is or Ripcord by iFly, which is an amazing skydiving experience on board. We have flow rider experience, a tremendous amount for people to see and do. The one thing that's probably become synonymous with the Quantum class is the North Star, which is a very interesting amenity. But at the end of the day, after our guests are on board for a week, they want to talk to me about the crew. So they love the ship, but they love the crew more. And at the end of the day, it's people looking after people. And I would say the service that's provided on board a cruise ship is what really differentiates a cruise vacation experience from any other experience out there. And we just want more people to come cruising. So anytime, we'd be happy to welcome you on board the Quantum of the Seas or another Royal Caribbean ship. So come see us sometime soon.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
Anytime.
Of course, I want to thank Darren for taking the time to sit down with me to answer some of those questions and provide all of you with some great information about how his job operates and how the Quantum of the Seas is able to operate itself. So that about wraps it up for this episode of the Cruise View. Tomorrow we are in Martinique for another port day. There's, I believe, one ship in port, the Norwegian Pearl, so unfortunately it will not be another Royal Caribbean day, but it's still a port day, which will be more ship spotting, more arrivals, departures, all those great videos. And of course, there were plenty of videos from today with all those Royal Caribbean ships in port, so be sure to check them out. So once again, I am Darren Picone, and stay tuned for all those links.